biggest need and the gap in the marketplace that our services at CRF goes to solve is really the capital constraints that most BIPOC business owners have faced. As Frank alluded to earlier, many of our clients that we work with have been left out of traditional financing streams. And so we like to work in partnership with our community partners to provide access to capital. And we did that, for example, during COVID. We partnered up with a number of our community led organizations to provide paycheck protection loans to their clientele base. And so we really look at the gap and the needs from an ecosystem perspective, and see and use innovative financial tools as a resource to solve that gap.
Unpack that for me. When you say innovative financial tools, what do you mean?
Uh, uh, as Frank talked about earlier, tools that you may not see on the traditional cap or being offered in traditional banks, while working in partnership with banks and financial institutions to create pathways to traditional lending sources. And so it could be anywhere between taking more riskier loans that we see a lot of Black and Brown community, especially those who were hit in light of COVID, were restaurants, were service-based businesses, and they were already risky profiles. And so really taking risk on riskier profiles that traditional lending streams may not qualify, or they are often locked out of, traditional lending streams because of their profile and their industry type.
Frank, some of the things I mentioned in the opening comments were really intriguing to me. The fact that it's known that minority-owned firms are 2 times more likely not to apply for loans for fear of rejection. And why that's important to point out here is it's not just in business, but it's an experience across the board in ethnic communities. I remember doing lots of stories, Frank, about home ownership and the fact that Black and Brown people that are looking to go from renting to home ownership might go and apply for one loan at one place. And if they get rejected, they figure they'll never own a home. And
right.
Whites, on the other hand, will not take the first loan. They'll go and get applied or apply and maybe get approved, and then go to 3 more and negotiate for the best deal. So there's a gap
Right.
in understanding, and there is this fear barrier that's internalized based on the history of rejection. And you are observing the same thing in business as well as people who are consumers experience. So how do we deal with that? How do we change the paradigm so that businesses both have the knowledge and the understanding to attack the opportunity differently, but also that we simultaneously work on removing the barriers that keep these businesses and these communities at disadvantage? What do you think?
Well, I think there's 2 sides to this. First, if you look at the banking sector, banks are for-profit institutions. They have a goal to make a margin on every loan they make. And when loans are difficult to underwrite, they're just going to say, we're going to move on to the next one. Community Reinvestment Fund and other community development organizations have a different approach. They say, how can we make a loan to this borrower? And so many times the borrower doesn't have the complete credit file that a bank would look for. So rather than just say we can't do the loan, we'll stretch and we'll try to help that borrower assemble the information necessary so that we can make a decision. If the borrower isn't ready to make a loan, we'll oftentimes connect that borrower with other organizations that can help them get ready to prepare to understand how their financial statements have to be presented so that we can actually make a decision. And that's really the big difference, I think, between what a community development organization does and traditional banking is reaching farther. We are intentional about the lending that we're doing. We're taking capital and we're trying to point that capital toward people who don't normally get it. And that's difficult. That's why we're a nonprofit. We're motivated by a different mission. And as a result, we've been able to lend to many, many borrowers that were rejected by their banks. In fact, we have created a platform called Connect to Capital that is connecting up with banks, and banks are sending that platform their rejections. when they think that for some reason we could make the loan or our CDFI colleagues could make a loan to one of their customers. So that's how we're trying to push against this. On the other side of the equation, we need to build trust, particularly in the African American community and other communities of color. And we are working very hard to build that trust through networks that already have a trust relationship. That's why we work so closely with ADC, African Development Center, with MEDA and others here, where that trust levels they're already known. There's a higher level of understanding. There's cultural competencies that we're trying to develop at CRF. We've got Anisha as a great colleague in this area, but building trust is the other side of the coin. And if you don't think you're going to get it approved and you're discouraged, you're not going to apply. And we know that in the African American community, survey after survey shows that there are many borrowers who just think that they're not going to move forward because they're not going to get a loan, and that's just not true. But there's a perception.
Anisha, speaking of perception, and one of the items in the note here suggests that on average, minority-owned businesses receive loan amounts less than half the value of those received by non-minority-owned businesses. Explain that phenomenon, that dynamic, and how that feeds into the exasperation or the distrust or the fear of rejection. If it's known that, if you get a loan, it'll be half of what somebody who's white and you're with comparables would get. And why that's important is that a generation ago, Frank, as we talked about trying to build community business and community agencies, both profit and nonprofit, the common thread or conversation on the street in the community was that the banks or the government or whoever it was would give you just enough to ensure that you would fail, that they would consistently and intentionally undercapitalize Black organizations, Black businesses, Black initiatives, and when the things would fail, as was almost inevitable because of undercapitalization, they could point to, we tried and they weren't prepared, weren't capable, weren't knowledgeable, any number of reasons of blaming these actors in community for their inability to arrive at sustainability and vitality around their economic agenda. So Anisha, I'm sure that what you're doing is addressing that. Talk about it if you would.
Yeah, well, I think the reason why CDFIs exist and really the work that we're doing at CRF is to really dismantle the systematic and institutional barriers that BIPOC business owners face when either getting qualified for a loan or just the whole totality of business, and making sure that they are okay throughout their business life cycle. And so the statistics around whether or not they get qualified for just enough is something that I actually wasn't privy to. But what I do know is that organizations like CRF, organizations like our community CDCs like MEDA, NDC are all around to combat that narrative and provide another narrative for entrepreneurs of color and avenues for entrepreneurs of color seeking funding. We do know that there is, to Frank's point and the point that was raised earlier that you mentioned, Al, there's just a distrust. And so a lot of these narratives or statistics also are bound by distrust. And how do we break that while creating systems change so that entrepreneurs of color, they know that when they come to a CRF or a MEDA, that they're getting their loan service, and not just their loan service, that we actually care about the entrepreneur in its wholeness and its totality.
Oh, that's great. Frank, what do you think, is the reason? It's obvious kind of creditworthiness maybe, but there's a history of the desperate rates of cost of money. Minority businesses paying 7.8% for loans compared to 6.4% with non-minority. So you would automatically think it's a question of creditworthiness, but is it that alone, or is that part of this whole question of examining systemic barriers to inclusion for brown and Black business owners? is it just the numbers? That's the question. Because I think the most of my white colleagues would say, oh, if your credit scores are there, you get the same thing everybody else gets. So that might not be true.
Well, first of all, I've been challenging our staff and the larger financial community to what I say, I'm using is to interrogate your policies. We're interrogating what about our policies do we think is so just normal that we don't even question whether the policies themselves are systemically biased or racist. And the credit score is one I'm very concerned about because there's a number of factors that go into the credit score. The credit scoring models are pretty much a black box, and yet increasingly all financial institutions, including CRF, are basically forced to use them. They become a norm in our underwriting system. And I'll give you a couple of examples of where it's an issue. One is the credit file. So there's a credit score, but there's also the credit score is based on your use of credit. And if you're an organization or an individual that has not used credit very extensively, your file is going to be so thin that it's hard to, it can easily change if something changes in your credit activity, and it can change very rapidly downward. So if you're depending on that and you're not going to go further than that, then you're probably going to get a rejection. Or, and I think this is where the question about differential pricing is, the lender is going to say, well, we're more likely to lose money on this because the credit score is low. We're going to charge more. So how can we unpack the credit score model and not go away from it? Because I don't think we're going to do that as an industry, but supplement it with other information. Because a credit score really is a big data system to try to tell a lender about your character and your willingness to repay your debts. It's not about, and a little bit about your capacity to repay as well. So we have to look for other alternatives. And I think at CRF, we're really trying to do that. We do have a matrix that looks at community impact. And the more impact, the more likelihood that a business is going to retain or add jobs, particularly jobs held by people of color. The more likely that they're going to generate high quality jobs, the more we're going to take the extra time to try to find a way of making that loan. And we'll go right to the edge to do that. Now, if it's somebody coming in doesn't really have a good story about what's going to do for the community, and
that are more equitable and more stronger and reflect not just the business owners, but also the community in its totality. And it takes all of us together doing it and working in this ecosystem to improve the livelihoods and the outcomes for Black and Brown communities and business owners.
Wonderful and well put. Let me close with this, a note of thanks to both of you, to the organization, and to your partners and colleagues. For me, part of the challenge, since I'm a communicator, is to be intentional as well in changing the narrative. We have to work on perception. Perception, after all, becomes and is reality. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we could cultivate the idea in Black and Brown communities that as cultural communities, we are entrepreneurial by nature, and that we are successful in our bid to be able to serve ourselves, our families, our communities. And we do this around principles, protocols of business that create profit for our personal businesses, jobs for our neighbors, our families, our friends, and create a vibrant, resilient, and growing economy that brings our best ideas, our best innovation, our best capabilities into play, and creates a place where we simply engage all of our assets, our people assets, in the creation of community and society, education, governance, health, everything. But it starts in part, or it must include, shifting the narrative, changing the
absolutely
perception and expectation. And I want to applaud you for what you're doing to generate a new awareness, a new understanding. Invite you to do more as well. So thank you so much.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane, my Thursday session. And my gratitude to Frank Altman and to Anisha Murphy and to their team, particularly Grace Rose, who brought together this conversation about the Community Reinvestment Fund. I'm going to shift now and bring in another guest, Alexander Bourne. And Alexander Bourne leads an organization called MRRC. That stands for the Minnesota Rapid Response Coalition. It's committed to responding to community needs using community-centered strategies that are measurable to help minority communities respond to dislocation, disruption caused by COVID-19. And you've got a particular project going on right now that is interesting, but it's practical and specific. And that is one that since 6 this morning, I think, to midnight tonight, you're helping people get laundry done. Alexander, talk about this for me.
Yes, hi, how are you?
I'm good. Welcome to the program, and thank you for wearing the mask. We're modeling what we need to do. So talk about the program that you're doing today.
Absolutely. Yeah, so today we're located at the Sunray Laundromat here in East St. Paul. We've been here since about 5 this morning, scheduled for 6, and expected to offer unlimited free coin laundry to anyone who show up between now and midnight. That includes laundry detergent, bleach, as well as rides and fabric softener. So it's pretty nice. So.
Why are you doing this? What's the reason? What's the strategy? What is it about? What is it about?
Yeah, absolutely. So the reason why we do it is to essentially reduce bullying as well as to enhance educational outcomes for our youth. We believe that if we can get these kids clothes washed, then they'll likely be in the school. And if that happens, then we can ultimately enhance their outcomes in life. So thank you.
So you've got a very specific project or activity that you think, as specific as it is, can bear a positive impact well beyond just being at a laundromat and getting laundry done free for one day. There's something symbolic in what you're doing. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, I apologize about that brief interruption there. Yes, Laundry Day is going on right now. Hundreds of people here right now trying to take advantage of this opportunity to essentially reimagine how we invest in community. We are doing it also to, challenge philanthropy, right? To look at some other social needs that are very much needed in minority communities in particular.
Tell me about the background of the Minnesota Rapid Response Coalition. Who are your partners and who have you worked with so far?
Absolutely. So dating back to the Blake fire, we were fortunate enough to work alongside the American Red Cross to help homeless individuals that had been displaced due to the fire get registered to vote in preparation for this critical election year here in 2020. In light of COVID-19, we have essentially rapidly responded around food justice, making sure that underprivileged and represented communities have access to healthy food options. So just really organizing in the space of food rescue, safety, as well as distribution. In light of the civil unrest pertaining to the murder of George Floyd, we've been very fortunate to have I would say, the most unique opportunity to support Black and Brown entrepreneurs, activists, organizations, and just overall people. I always tell people we got to start investing in people and not businesses because sometimes people just simply need a hand up. And here at the Minnesota Rapid Response Coalition, we're just looking to leverage this flexible tool to really engage in social justice related issues as we see fit.
Okay, so what can people do today and what can people do long term to be aware of and to support your work?
Absolutely. So right now we have a fund that we're building. to support Black and Brown businesses, activists, organizations, just all around grassroots individuals that are out here putting themselves on the line in light of a global pandemic. We need money. You know, we don't have that Lake Street Council money. You know, we are out here just trying to put our best foot forward for those most vulnerable in our community, particularly within our entrepreneurial ecosystem.
If you have a website or a phone number that people can call to connect with you, and do you want to make a special invitation for families? I think the story is that within a 10-mile radius, anybody can get transportation to bring their household laundry and to get their laundry done at no charge to them, or to do their own laundry in a coin-operated laundromat. I think that's a novel, unique, specific idea, and I applaud you for doing that, because there are all kinds of ways to help and all kinds of strategies, and that's a unique one from my point of view. But
absolutely, it's certainly out of the mainstream. But to answer your question, our website is wearemrrc.com. Again, that's wearemrrc.com. Feel free to give me a call on my personal cell phone number. It's listed there on the website as well. I try my very best to be as responsive as possible.
Great, thank you so much. Well, let me close out with thanking you, Alexander Bourne, with the Minnesota Rapid Response Coalition, and thanking Frank Altman and Anisha Murphy for their work through the Community Reinvestment Fund. I hope you like this conversation. If you do like it, share it. It's available on Facebook Live and also on YouTube. Our objective is to create conversations like this, to have and share this information with you in the digital and social media space. We love to have your comments, your feedback when we do this. Frank and Anisha, last word before we close. Anything else that you want to add?
Our website, www.crfusa.com. Any entrepreneur who's looking for capital and wants to connect with us, that's the best way. And then we'll work you through the system to see how we can be most effective.
Thank you so very, very much. I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.